Welcome to the eCommerce Profits Podcast, where we feature top founders and experts in the e-commerce industry and take an in-depth look at the struggles and successes in growing e-commerce brands profitably.
Josh Shin here. I'm the host of the eCommerce Profits Podcast, where we feature top experts in the e-com industry, and we go behind the scenes of the struggles and successes in growing a brand. Now, this episode is brought to you by Chronos.agency. If you run a direct-to-consumer e-com brand that is ready to scale and double your customer lifetime value through retention marketing, Chronos is your company. We've helped hundreds of brands scale profits with email, SMS, and mobile push while getting an average of 3,500% ROI from our efforts. And we've worked with brands like Truly Beauty, Elias Skin, and The Udi, and many more. The next step is to email us at sales@chronos.agency, or you can go to chronos.agency to learn more. Today's guest is Casey Armstrong. He's the CMO of ShipBob and the former VP of marketing at BigCommerce. ShipBob is a cloud-based logistics platform that brings Amazon-level logistics to DTC brands of all sizes. And they currently serve over 5,000 e-com brands from all around the world. Casey, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now let's take you way back before you ended up in the tech world and the e-com world. You did a little bit of traveling. Tell us a little bit about that and how has that shaped your mindset and who you are today?
Yeah, that was very fond memories of that time. So I actually started my career in the real estate space for a handful of reasons. I decided I really wanted to travel for a while. So I actually bought a one-way ticket and flew out with just my backpack and traveled for about 14 months straight, which was a lot of fun. I got to go through Southeast Asia and Nepal and Australia and South and Central America and just meet so many amazing people and see so many different cultures. It really opened my eyes to the world. And that is what really pushed me into the technology and being able to connect again with people from all over. It was really what pushed me over the edge. I was actually in this internet cafe during my travels and in this place I was for quite a while, and I was looking around, and this was about 2008. I was looking around, and I was the only person not on Facebook. And at that time, I still viewed Facebook as this kind of like toy. And I remember, I was in college when Facebook actually got to our school. That was like a thing where we made the cut. And I was looking around, and it's so interesting. I found I was actually the only American in the internet cafe and the only one not using it. So I started asking around, like, what are you using it for? And people are using it, to talk to their friends cross border. People are using it to upload photos to connect with, their family that was following their travels like around the world. And those are pretty obvious now, but they were not obvious back then. And that really was just such a light bulb for me, where I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. Where there's this guy in Boston that built this app, and he's touching the entire world. In real estate, really how you get, I think, outsized returns is by focusing on specific markets, which is the opposite of what we do in the technology world, where I'm in Southern California, you're in Singapore. We couldn't be at different time zones really, and it's just so easy for us to connect, and not just on the podcast, but on other opportunities as well, which is just so much fun. So anyways, that was what really pushed me over the edge to jump into the technology world.
I love that. And now coming into your background in kind of your entire journey from BigCommerce, and before that, you were also an entrepreneur and you exited a couple of companies of your own. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say loosely on the couple of companies. I did run my own agencies a couple times. The beauty of agencies, as you know, is you get to work with so many different brands. The pace of learning is also very high, just like when you're heads down on one specific company, because you're forced to just change context so quickly in regards to the types of customers you're working with and the problems that you're trying to solve. And you're often working with, either their CEO or co-founder or maybe their marketing lead. and you're trying to compete against, the best of the best with their competition. And again, you're jumping around from one brand to another. But the problem with that I felt is I couldn't get necessarily deep enough. And so that's why I wanted to jump full time into certain brands. And so, yeah, I also helped run a company called Paleo Hacks, which we sold. And then that was what led me to working at a company called Watchmaster. We were a luxury watch direct to consumer brand over in Germany. And then that's when I jumped over to BigCommerce.
That is amazing. Now, tell us a little bit more about your role at ShipBob and what exactly do you do?
What do I do? So I'm the CMO over at ShipBob. That includes all things marketing, as you'd expect. I also get to oversee the partnership side of the business, which I really enjoy, working with our technology partners from, the Googles and the Facebooks and the Walmarts of the world to, the up and coming technology companies, like, let's say, Gorgeous years ago when they were pretty early on, and, they've made such a huge name for themselves. It's been so impressive to watch their journey to, newer companies today, like Alloy, which is really trying to be the Zapier for e-commerce. And then just a lot of our agency partners, whether they're doing design and development, whether they're doing marketing. And then also we partner with some VC firms as well to help make sure that we can, provide just a solid solution for their portfolio across the board.
And now a little bit more about ShipBob. We had a little bit of a chat prior to this, but the role of ShipBob in the e-com, I guess, industry is such that you enable for great brands to become even greater by basically removing all the headaches and the pains that come with logistics and fulfillment. And I know for a fact that that's one of the key roadblocks that high growth brands face as they go through that scaling phase. And that happens to be ShipBob's, I guess, bread and butter. Tell me a little bit about how does that happen in terms of the scaling phase of an e-commerce brand, and how important a logistics partner is in that process?
So something we hear very often, whether it's an entrepreneur that's, let's just say, at a couple 100,000 in revenue, or an entrepreneur that's doing a couple million in revenue, is like they felt like they couldn't truly scale or grow until they moved to us over at ShipBob. And the reason is because fulfillment, it's such a time intensive practice. And so it's either you, the founder, or the co-founders, or you're going to be hiring people to do this, where no matter what, every time you get an order, you need to find it, you need to pick it, you need to pack it, you need to do whatever else, if there's anything from like a kitting or customization perspective. And then you need to get that to the carriers. And so, if you're small, that's probably you filling up your car and dropping it off. If you're larger, maybe you're able to get the carriers to come by your office, which is probably a warehouse. But again, it's very time intensive. And unless you have a very strong operations background, that's probably not your differentiator as a brand. And so that's where we want to come in, where, again, whether you're just getting started or you're doing, tens of millions in revenue, you can really get a global solution that can provide you with that fast and affordable shipping overnight.
What are some of the things that logistics partners wouldn't tell e-com brands, but they should know about it?
So something that, we see all the time, I'll think of something tactical, because that's actually a good question. Actually, let me rephrase that question quickly, and then I'll answer your question.
Sure.
Before you before you start looking for fulfillment solutions, I think you should really outline what you're looking for. Like, what do you need, and who are you as a business? And so, for example, do you ship solely in the United States? Do you ship solely in Singapore? Do you ship all over the world? What kind of partner do you actually need? And what types of items are you shipping? Are you shipping, let's say, an iPhone case, which is light, and so you're able to utilize different types of shipping methods? Or are you shipping, kettlebells, which are extremely heavyweight, and you need to just think about, your operations very differently. And so again, I think it's just thinking through your business a little bit more. And then you want to remind me of your question really quickly?
Yeah. So what are some of the things that, logistics partners don't tell e-com brands, things that they should know about?
I think one of the biggest is like hidden fees. Like we see that all the time, where people they'll try to, they'll be, enamored with our technology, the levels of transparency they'll get in their business, the footprint we have around the world, what they hear from other merchants. But when we talk about pricing, they'll point to what they're hearing from others, and we see this all the time, where it's almost like this bait and switch with other companies, where once you actually dig into it, or once you start working with them, you start getting tacked with all these fees. And so I think that's something to think about, which is to really understand what you're going to be paying for. And so that's one item, is to really understand what the contract states. Another thing that we see often, which I'm actually surprised that this is still a practice, Amazon does this, but Amazon, is Amazon. They can kind of do whatever they want.
Oh, yeah.
We see certain fulfillment providers, they'll charge more during Q4, and that's your peak season. And they won't necessarily charge more on the fulfillment side, but they'll charge more on the storage side. And that's again, that's when you need them more than ever. That's when some companies make between 30 to 50% of their revenue. It's in that 3-month sprint, if not just November and December. Again, I find that pretty mind blowing that companies are still doing that, but it's just some stuff like that. And then I'd say the last item, again, it really maybe centers around peak season. And I know it's only, what are we in? It's towards the end of May, which means that companies are actually probably starting to plan for peak. I know that we started planning for peak basically the day that it ended.
Yeah.
Is just blackout dates and times of operation. Again, like you need your partners to be with you when it's the most difficult, and when it's really your true money making season. And so, we've seen 3PLs that they won't receive inventory for like an entire month before peak season starts. That's when you need them the most. And so again, I would just identify like what's most important for you as a brand, and just really dig into like the nitty gritty of how they operate as a business.
And I guess that means asking more questions from the get-go. And the sad thing is that finding a good partner, and this is a cautionary tale. Back in, I think it was 2018, where when Shopify and the whole e-com space was kind of beginning to pick up and really take off, we had a client in the DTC space. They scaled their business effectively 10x their business in a single month. And it's not going from 20K to 200K in a single month. It's going from 200K to over 2 million in revenue per month.
Can you share the category?
They were in the toys category. So
awesome.
Nothing super heavy or hard to manufacture. But unfortunately, because of the, I guess, lack of preparation and lack of that know-how, and obviously with a poor selection of partners on the logistics front, their manufacturing and logistics partners just couldn't handle the load and effectively crumbled under the weight. And they had to shut down the business due to customer complaints, delays in shipping, problems with the products. It was a mess, and it's such a shame. It's such a shame.
This all happened when their volume spiked, you're saying?
As the volume was spiking, exactly. So that what you were just sharing, it just reminded me so much about, I guess, to some degree, predatory practices in the logistics space. And it's just so, like, when you talked about ShipBob, what I think about is data, transparency, and reliability as a partner. And that's just so difficult to find, especially when you're shopping around for partners where everyone claims to be the best at what they do. So I guess
Well, that scale thing is a real problem, and we see that all the time when people are coming to us and they're almost like banging down the door trying to see how quickly they can move over because the example you gave, it's not uncommon, is people will they'll be working so hard for years, and then they'll have that quote unquote overnight success, and then they get this step function jump in their growth, and their partners are not equipped to handle that. And so that's one of the focus areas for us, is just like, if you're hosting your web application on Amazon Web Services or AWS, and all of a sudden, you start trending on whatever product hunt, or Elon tweets about you or whatever it may be, and everybody starts using you, you can just spin up additional instances and you're scaling, right then and there without having to make any infrastructure changes. We want the same thing to be for us at ShipBob, where, and we see this with our customers as well, where they'll all of a sudden get, some TikTok video will go viral, or they'll be featured on Good Morning America, or something like that. And all of a sudden they go from shipping, 100 orders a month to shipping 15,000 orders in like a single day. And so that's where you're taking advantage of, this massive network like ours, and the ability to flex up and down, because like that's more or less a blip on the radar for us to flex up. Whereas just like with your example, if you're working with like a smaller fulfillment house, that can completely kill their business. And I don't know if I'd even say that they're being predatory. I don't have the details. Maybe they were, but it could just be that they were not equipped to 10x overnight.
how would you identify the right partners from the get-go? What kind of questions would you ask?
So, I mean, we talked a little bit about before on like thinking through, what, like who you are as a business, but I would ask for, well, one is understanding like the contract, what you will and won't be paying for. Another is like the technology that you're going to be utilizing. Does this sync with, let's say, your e-commerce platform and or the channels that you utilize most often for your sales? You really need to understand that. For example, if you're selling primarily B2B and it's in a bunch of small retailers, can they handle that from a technology perspective? Or are you selling primarily through your Shopify website or BigCommerce website or WooCommerce website? Can they handle that? And what does that look like? Again, another is just the footprint. So where do they ship out of? And then I would start getting into like some of their SLAs and expectations. And so what does that look like? Not just today, heading into like the summer months, but what does that really look like? And actually, maybe this is a better use of their time, is really focusing on like, what do their SLAs and expectations look like during the holiday season? Because again, that's when you need the most, during peak.
Yeah.
And, last year was weird, where the whole year was pretty much peak season, and then double peak. But is really understanding what that looks like at that point.
So what it sounds like is that you would advocate for brands to start planning ahead for, I guess the best case scenario. And what if I 10x tomorrow? What if I get featured on Good Morning America? Can my partners handle that scale, that volume, or would they break? Where would it break first? What are the biggest contributors to? Well, on the flip side, what are the biggest contributors to the success of an e-commerce brand? Now, I know that's a super broad question, but I'm tapping into your experience in ShipBob, looking at so many different customers, and also your experience with BigCommerce in the marketing space and as a whole.
So say the question again.
What are the biggest contributors to the success of an e-com brand in 2021's context?
Yes, there are a lot of angles we can go there. I'd say, broadly speaking, it's kind of timing like the zeitgeist and what's happening at a macro level. Again, you need to execute like hell. You need to be building a community and truly building a brand. But I think if you can time certain waves, for example, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who runs a pretty big agency down in Southern California, and they've been incubating a few brands, and a handful are in the pet wellness space. and it's really bringing these human grade food to pets, and that's just an example of this space that is just blowing up. I remember when I joined ShipBob, even the first day there, what we used to do for onboarding pre-COVID, and hopefully we bring that back, is you'd actually spend a few days in the fulfillment center, receiving items, picking and packing, really understanding how, like, what's happening. Actually, I was at the fulfillment center yesterday also. Like, I love going in there. The energy's off the charts. But anyways, like, my first job was in the receiving section. And, from how we receive it, how we scan it, but even like how we do counts to make sure that the accuracy is right, and the barcodes are correct and everything like that. And it was dog CBD. And I'm like, what is this like? Is this really a thing? And, I'm talking with the merchant success manager that was overseeing that account, who I met later that week. And she was like, yes, like they do extremely well. And, she was able to show me some of the volume that we do on their behalf. And it just blew my mind. I just love that as well as a marketer, and just as somebody who's, extremely curious and loves learning about new things. Is there's so many industries out there that you just don't even think about, or these niches within niches that are massive. And so it's just, you got to go in open-minded, and, I think just start poking around. I mean, just even spend a couple, just a little bit of time on Reddit, and you see just these massive, subreddit communities that are huge in these industries you'd never expect. Again, the same thing happens in the e-commerce space.
I got a really good resource. I'm subscribed to Trends and The Hustle, the newsletter. Incredible content, so amazingly curated content. And they have a great podcast as well. They turn like a couple of their newsletters into podcast episodes as well. Just great content all around. And you're right. I guess Reddit is a good source.
And I don't use it too often. I'm just trying to think of an example, that has these. It's just so easy to identify, or I guess just to like open your eyes to how big certain like niches are. And again, back to what I said earlier, we're just timing the zeitgeist, which is not something you can necessarily plan for. But if, as like, let's just say the importance of people's pets grows massively, it's lifting up all the brands in the space, because like the macro demand is skyrocketing versus picking like an older industry or an industry that's slowly dying. That's tough, because then you're just fighting this uphill battle every single day.
Makes sense. Talking about that, and also I guess that then turns into an who can execute that the best, or who can execute it well. The future of ShipBob in growing the business. What do you see the future of ShipBob to be like in the e-com space?
Yeah, so I gave the example earlier on how we want to be as easy as AWS, but on the fulfillment side. And for us, our mission is really to democratize fulfillment for brands of all sizes around the world. And we really mean that. Again, sometimes we get in some pretty heated conversations, throughout the org or at the leadership level on some really important decisions. And at the end of the day, we think through like, does this support or detract from our mission? And it's really led to us, making some tough decisions in regards to just the level of effort that we pour into new things. And so I'll give a handful of examples, like international. I think people, not that they necessarily really even care, but don't realize the levels of complexity when you are running a fulfillment center or a fulfillment network. And all these edge cases, and you're dealing with all these different companies and all these different products and all these people. And then all of a sudden you go global, and maybe there's different units of measurement and different carriers and different regulations. But that was that's something we knew that we had to open up. And so, we opened up multiple fulfillment centers internationally last year, such as in Canada and Ireland. We've opened up a fulfillment center this year in the UK, actually right by Heathrow Airport in London. We'll be opening up multiple more international fulfillment centers this year. And so in short, I'd say going global, that's a big focus for us. Yeah, you look at what's happened in the payment space and them really knocking down a lot of barriers to sell and transact. You look at what Shopify and BigCommerce and others have done with like multi-site, multi-language, multi-currency. And that has to happen on the fulfillment side. And that's a huge bet that we're making and something that we, place a lot of value in.
In the middle of the global pandemic, no less, how has that shifted your strategy in any way in that expansion? Obviously, we're all riding on the wave of growth in the e-com space, but there has to be some kind of a challenge in setting up fulfillment centers in the middle of a global lockdown.
No question. Those are the days where I'm so thankful that I'm not running our logistics arm. So I give them so much credit, and hats off to them. Just their level of focus and ability to open up fulfillment centers globally and in the US as well. I mean, we had 4 fulfillment centers at the end of 2019. We had 14 at the end of 2020, and we should exit this year with over 30 fulfillment centers.
Doubling it. Wow. That's real quick. Now, for a brand that's just about to scale, and you've obviously worked with brands at different levels of progress. What does logistics look like for a brand at the sub 1 mil revenue level, and past at 1 mil and past the 10 mil? Are there key differences that you see or have observed?
They can look very similar, but I'd say one of the biggest items that I noticed is really where they sell. And so oftentimes, let's just say you're in the sub 1 million range, or maybe even, a couple million, you might just be selling through your website. So you're selling directly. I'd say, once you start getting past the several million mark, you start looking at different marketplaces. And so are you going to sell on Walmart? Are you going to sell on Amazon? Are you going to start testing out something like Facebook Shop? And so I'd say that's where they start really getting into like that multi-channel space. And then I don't know if 10 million is the mark. And again, it depends on each business. But then I'd say the next evolution after that is B2B or retail. And so, are you going to try to sell at Target? Are you going to try to sell through Target, let's say like with their marketplace? So more of like a B2B to C play. And so again, I think the natural evolution is directly through your website to selling multi-channel, and then, trying to find the offline route as well.
Awesome. Now shifting the focus in the conversation a little bit to you. What are some of the best advice and the worst advice that you have heard?
The best, I don't know if I'll give like specific quotes or anything, but I think, just finding people that are as equally like driven and curious as you are. I mean, I think curiosity is really the key to long-term success, and that, you're never done learning. And I like to just really, regardless of the industry that I'm in or what I'm working on, is like, how can I view this from every single angle, from the angle of the actual brand and working very closely with the brand and trying to understand their businesses intimately, to from the logistics side, what's happening with the platforms, what's happening with all the different technologies they use. And then, the corollary, the opposite would just be, I guess, where I've seen people maybe plateau or stunt their career, even if just temporarily, is when you're working, with a manager or a company that just really wants to put you in a box and have you do just, hey, follow these mundane steps and kind of like just thwart the creativity, because you're not really pushing yourself and learning. And so I think that's one of the things that people should always optimize for or over index on, is like, how can I continue to learn? And that's up to you. Like it blows my mind, when there's just different things that I'm trying to understand better or learn, like the amount of access to information we have today from YouTube to different courses to blog posts. Like, there's, and it's all, and so much of it is free, and you can find good stuff. And so again, you got to weed out like the bad, but there's just so much good information, or podcasts. Like it blows my mind. Like, you want to understand, I don't know, multifamily real estate in the United States. Like, guess what? There's some amazing podcasters and information out there that will teach you that, and then get you into these early stage syndicates, so you can start putting a tiny bit of money to play, to start learning like what do the mechanics look like, go through the motions, to really understand the space. Where, rewind 10, 15 years ago, like that would have been nearly impossible. You'd have to go to the library and get a book, or, you'd find some pretty poorly written blog post, but you wouldn't be able to connect with people. That's another thing also, that pre-COVID, so it was like the beginning of 2020. This might sound kind of, I don't know, weird or cheesy, but like one of the things I wanted to do by using Twitter was, I was like, all right, I'm going to start trying to maximize like the direct messages or the DMs in Twitter. And so I was like, all right, every week I have to like DM somebody, new, just to, connect with them, and, how can I add value, and vice versa. And just the types of people that you can connect with. And some people just ignore it, and that's fine. Maybe they saw it, maybe they didn't, but like there are people that will say yes. And so it's just the ability to just connect with people around the world. It's pretty fascinating.
Love that. You mentioned podcasts. What are your favorite podcasts that you listen to on a regular or semi-regular basis?
So I've been traveling much, much less, obviously, since the pandemic. And so my podcast intake has slowed some. And so I guess I view it as how I read books, at least most recently, is I use it to kind of take my mind off of work some, or explore other interests. And so I listen to a lot of sports podcasts like Bill Simmons and Ryan Russillo and some others. But from like a business standpoint, the one that I listen to the most would be Patrick O'Shaughnessy's Invest Like the Best, which I actually got into from an interview that he did with Sam Hinkie, who was the GM of the Philadelphia 76ers, the basketball team. And just his application of like really math plus really thinking differently, and staying so true to, his thesis on like how to build a team over time. And then from there, just really went down the rabbit hole of a lot of his podcasts. And he's a great interviewer, and he has such fascinating people. You can learn a lot there. And then some other ones that are pretty good as well, especially if you're interested in the technology or the investment space, is Howard Lindson's podcast that he launched similar to you during COVID. And so he talks to some of like the largest VCs, or just some very interesting people. There's one he does with Trent Griffin, who's a longtime Microsoft employee, to say the least. And it's just the stories that you hear from these people. It's pretty fascinating.
I love that. What about books? Are you a big reader?
I am, but it's primarily fiction. And so,
that's great. No, I have been I guess, to quote a friend of mine, a just-in-time reader, meaning if I'm facing a problem, I will devour like 10, 20 different books and search for an answer. And fiction never really gave me that solution. So I never really thought of books as an avenue of enjoyment more than a kind of like a solution provider, if you will. So I'm personally curious about, what are some of the books that you would recommend for someone like me?
I guess it depends on your interest. And so I find it very enjoyable. I actually find you can sometimes learn more through fiction than nonfiction. Just,
Interesting.
Life imitates art. But and also just these writers, the way that they think about things, like from like a psychological perspective and a character development perspective. I feel like sometimes it's maybe even more true to like what you'll read in these books, which are largely, I guess the business examples might portray, or might tend to be rather true, but my mind just races too hard when I read nonfiction, especially at night. Whereas fiction, I feel like, is the easiest way for me to go to bed. So anyways, I guess it just depends on like, what your interests are.
What are some titles that are easy to get into? Well, I personally enjoy biographies and autobiographies. Shoe Dog was a great one. I guess the furthest away from or rather the closest to a story that I have read.
I read Swish, which was written, I want to say in the early 90s, but it was about Phil Knight and Nike. I'm blanking on the author. I believe it was by two women. One of them was, she was like a longtime Nike employee. Anyways, I would check out Swish. I think they call it like the unauthorized biography of Nike. And I know that there's a lot of like the similar stories are told in both, but it was really good. And I'm surprised it doesn't get as much fanfare, especially as, Shoe Dog obviously blew up.
I'm just trying to look for the book right now. And
it's like hard to find. I don't know. I probably bought like a used one on Amazon or something, but
I'll definitely check that out. Awesome. And for people who are listening, what is one advice that you give the audience, Casey?
Probably similar to before. And again, it's maybe semi-cliche, but just like stay curious, always be learning. You don't have to always have like a goal in mind, scratch that itch and go after it. And you don't know what can unfold. Again, it's like, I wanted to see more of the world and travel. And I didn't know what was the outcome or what the outcome was going to be. There were really no goals in mind. And then, I just went and did it. And I think it really changed the trajectory of my life and, where I am today and the type of people that I get to hang out with, brings me here today where we're chatting from, two different sides of the world where had I not taken that trip, had I not completely changed the industry I was in, which was scary at the time, especially as I was getting into my late 20s. But, just bet on yourself and stay curious.
I love that. Casey, thank you so much for being on the show. If people are interested in connecting with you and learning more about ShipBob, where should they go to?
Yeah, please come check us out, ShipBob.com. If you have specific questions for me, C Armstrong at ShipBob.com. Definitely happy to help.
Awesome. Casey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the eCommerce Profits Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get notified of future episodes.